My sister stole my husband and had his baby, then my whole family abandoned me, but now I'm rich, engaged, and refuse to forgive them. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. I'm a 32-year-old woman now, sitting here in my own home, a place that finally feels safe, and I'm thinking about my life, realizing I've never truly spoken about how much my childhood, my family, shaped everything that came after. It's a story about betrayal, but it's also a story about finding your own strength when you have no other choice. I grew up in what you'd probably call a standard, middle-class family in the heart of the Midwest. We had a nice 2-story house on a quiet, tree-lined street, a reliable station wagon in the driveway, and we hosted summer barbecues in the backyard. From the outside, looking in, you'd think we were the picture of normalcy, something straight out of an old television show. But inside those walls, it was a different story. When it came to favoritism, my family made it painfully, excruciatingly obvious who the star of the show was. And it was never me. My sister, Lorelei, 3 years older than me, was the golden child. It was like she was born sparkling. She had this bright, blonde hair that always seemed to catch the light perfectly, a confident, easy smile, and she was the absolute apple of everyone's eye. Now, looking back, I'm not saying she didn't deserve some of the attention. She was charismatic and talented in her own way. But the way my parents treated her compared to me, it was like living in 2 different households under the same roof. It was like she was living in vibrant color, and I was in black and white. I honestly can't remember a single time growing up where I didn't feel like the backup plan, the quiet afterthought. Let me give you a few examples, just so you really understand what it was like. When Lorelei, at age 12, decided on a whim that she wanted to take ballet lessons, my parents didn't just sign her up. They launched a full-scale operation. They researched and enrolled her at the best, most expensive dance studio in town, the one with the Russian instructors who barely spoke English. They would sit through every single one of her long, grueling rehearsals, perched on those hard wooden benches, their eyes fixed only on her. They bought her all the fancy gear, the custom-fit point shoes that had to be ordered from New York, the endless supply of silk ribbons and pink leotards. After every recital, it was a family tradition to take her out for a celebratory ice cream sundae at that old-fashioned parlor downtown, the kind with the red vinyl booths and jukeboxes. Me? When I was 10, I discovered that I loved to draw. I wasn't loud or performative like Lorelei, I was quiet. I was super into sketching, filling entire notebooks with charcoal drawings of everything I could see, the gnarled branches of the old oak tree in our backyard, the face of our sleeping dog, the way the light hit the dust motes in my room. It was my whole world. I begged my mom to sign me up for a local art program at the community center. It wasn't expensive, maybe $50 for the whole summer, nothing like Lorelei's ballet. I remember meticulously putting together a little portfolio of my best drawings to show her, my hands shaking with a mix of pride and nervousness. She flipped through them while stirring a pot on the stove, her attention divided. She glanced at a drawing I was particularly proud of, one of our house. "That's nice, sweetie," she said, giving me a quick, distracted smile. "But maybe next year. We're a little stretched thin right now with Lorelei's lessons." Next year came and went. And the year after that. And guess what? No art class. Instead, Lorelei decided she was bored with ballet and wanted to try piano. And just like that, a shiny new digital keyboard appeared in our living room, a space that was suddenly filled with the sound of her clumsy scales. Then there was the whole birthday thing, which was a yearly reminder of my status in the family. For Lorelei's 16th birthday, my parents got her a car. It wasn't brand new, just a sensible used sedan, but still, it was a car. Freedom. They threw this big surprise party for her in the backyard, inviting all her popular friends. There were balloons tied to the mailbox and a huge banner that read "Happy Sweet 16, Lorelei." When I turned 16 2 years later, I didn't even bother asking for something like that. I knew better. My birthday celebration consisted of the 4 of us having dinner at home. What I got was a small sheet cake from the grocery store with that waxy, too sweet frosting, and a card from the drugstore that said, "We're so proud of you, Beatrice." Proud of what? Surviving another year as the family's invisible child? I remember sitting in my room that night, looking out the window at her car parked in the driveway, the one she barely ever let me borrow, and just feeling this hollow, heavy ache in my chest. It wasn't about the car, not really. It was about the glaring, undeniable proof of how little I mattered in comparison. Graduation was the exact same story, but on a grander scale. When Lorelai graduated high school, my parents threw this massive party. They rented out a banquet hall at the local country club, invited half the town, and made a huge deal out of it. There was a DJ, a catered buffet, and a slideshow of her life playing on a loop. When it was my turn, we had a small barbecue in the backyard with a few relatives. It felt less like a celebration and more like a let's get this over with kind of event. My dad actually clapped me on the shoulder, a burger in his other hand, and said, "Well, we already did the big party for Lorelai, so this is just more low-key." Low-key. That was the word for my entire existence in that house. Always turned down, always in the background. What really stung, what truly set the stage for everything that came later, was how they handled college. I worked my absolute butt off in high school. I wasn't naturally brilliant like Lorelai seemed to be, I didn't coast. I had to study for hours every night to get my straight A's. I volunteered at the local animal shelter on weekends, I was on the debate team. I did everything I was supposed to do to build a future for myself, because I knew no one else would build it for me. And it paid off. I got into one of the top programs in the country for fragrance chemistry. It was my dream, my one true passion, to create custom perfumes, to bottle memories and emotions. I remember the day I got the thick acceptance letter in the mail. My hands were shaking. I ran into the kitchen where my parents were sitting at the table, reading the newspaper and drinking coffee. I held it out to them, my face beaming, my heart pounding with a hope that was, in hindsight, foolish. "I got in," I said, my voice cracking with excitement. "It's the best program in the country for what I want to do." They looked at the letter, then at me. They looked underwhelmed. My mom folded her reading glasses and set them carefully on the table. "That's great, honey," she said, her tone completely flat. "But you know we can't help much with tuition. You know, Lorelai's MBA payments are still a lot." My dad just nodded in agreement, not even looking up from the sports page. "The college fund we set aside for you girls got pretty much used up on her undergraduate degree. You'll have to figure out the loans and everything on your own." The college fund. The one they had always talked about for the girls. It was a lie. It had always been for the girl. I stood there in the middle of the kitchen, the letter feeling like a lead weight in my hand. Of course. You see, Lorelai had moved back home after getting her undergraduate degree because she didn't land her dream job right away. And my parents bent over backward to make her comfortable. They turned the guest room into her own personal suite, helped her with her car payments and credit card bills, and even paid for her to go to an expensive coding boot camp when she decided marketing wasn't for her. She lived at home, rent-free, a 30-year-old woman being waited on hand and foot, while I was about to go hundreds of miles away and drown myself in debt. So that's what I did. I worked 2, sometimes 3, part-time jobs all through college to afford my tiny, drafty apartment and my sky-high tuition. I was a waitress at a greasy spoon diner on weekends, coming home smelling like coffee and fried bacon, my feet aching. I'd count my tips at the end of a long shift, a small pile of wrinkled bills that had to stretch for groceries for the whole week. During the week, I worked the checkout at the campus bookstore. There was no help from home, no handouts, just me, grinding it out. I remember one time calling home, feeling overwhelmed and homesick, and I could hear them in the background planning a weekend ski trip for Lorelai to cheer her up after a bad job interview. I hung up and just cried. When I did come home to visit for holidays, the little things showed just how much they favored her. Lorelai would casually mention she needed new clothes, and my mom would immediately say, "Let's go to the mall on Saturday." My treat. I'd save up for months to buy a single pair of decent jeans, and my mom would comment, "Oh, didn't you just buy clothes last month?" The Christmas before I graduated really solidified everything for me. My parents always went all out with gifts for Lorelai. That year, she got an expensive new smartwatch and a custom leather work bag with her initials monogrammed on it. I opened my gifts to find a multi-pack of athletic socks and a $25 Target gift card. The worst part? They acted like it was totally equal. My mom literally said, with a bright, clueless smile, "We tried to spend the same amount on you both." Sure, Mom. The favoritism wasn't just annoying, it was corrosive. It messed with my self-esteem in ways I'm still untangling. I constantly felt like I wasn't good enough. Like no matter what I did, Lorelai would always be the one they cared about more. And she just soaked it all up, never questioning it, never once sticking up for me. It wasn't until I was older that I realized how much this dynamic shaped me. I worked harder than I probably needed to because I felt like I had something to prove to the world, since I couldn't prove it to them. But at the same time, I learned to be fiercely independent because I knew, deep down, I couldn't rely on anyone else. Not even my own family. During my final year of school, I was juggling a million things: my advanced chemistry classes, my 2 jobs, and an unpaid internship at a local cosmetics lab. One of those jobs was at a small, independent perfume shop in the city. It was a beautiful little place tucked away on a cobblestone street. It wasn't glamorous work, I mostly just dusted the antique glass bottles and worked the register, but I loved it. I spent my days surrounded by these incredible fragrances, learning about the different notes. I'd experiment with scent strips when the store was empty, and I loved helping customers find perfumes that felt like them. For me, it wasn't just a job to pay the bills, it felt like a small, tangible step toward my dream. That's where I met Preston. He came into the shop one rainy Tuesday afternoon. I remember the little brass bell over the door chiming. He was looking for a custom scent for a client, and he just stood out from the usual customers. He was tall, polished in a way that was understated and not flashy, and he had this easy confidence about him. At first, I pegged him as just another wealthy guy who wanted something expensive to impress someone. But he surprised me. He actually seemed interested in the process. He didn't just point at the most expensive bottle. He leaned against the counter and asked me real questions. "So, what's the difference between a base note and a top note?" he asked, with a genuine curiosity in his eyes. I found myself smiling, really smiling, for the first time in what felt like weeks. "The top notes are what you smell first. They're bright but they fade quickly," I explained, pulling out a few vials of essential oils. "The base notes are the foundation. They're what lingers on your skin for hours." We spent nearly an hour together that afternoon, working on the perfect blend for his client. I learned he ran a successful tech startup, but he talked about it without a hint of arrogance. He was more interested in hearing about my passion. By the time he left, I was impressed by how down-to-earth he was. He came back a week later to pick up the final product. And instead of just paying and leaving, he stayed to chat for another 20 minutes. Over the next few months, Preston became a regular. He'd stop by on his lunch break, sometimes with a hot cup of coffee for me, and we'd just talk. He told me about the challenges of his business, the long hours, the stress. And he listened to me. He was the first person who ever took a genuine interest in my goals. He'd ask, "So how did that organic chemistry exam go?" or "Tell me about that new scent you're working on with the tobacco and vanilla notes." He actually remembered the details. Eventually, after weeks of these casual conversations, he asked me out on a proper date. I remember being so nervous. I hadn't dated much, I was always too busy working and studying. The idea of dating someone like Preston, so successful and put together, felt intimidating. We went to a quiet little Italian restaurant. He didn't care that I was still a student working 2 jobs and living on a diet of ramen noodles. He told me he admired my drive and my passion. He made me feel seen in a way I never had before. Our relationship moved quickly, but it felt so natural, so right. Preston was supportive in ways I wasn't used to. When I had late-night study sessions for my final exams, he'd have takeout delivered to my tiny apartment so I wouldn't forget to eat. When I was stressed and overwhelmed, he'd be the one to say, "Hey, let's just take a walk. You need a break." He wasn't just my boyfriend, he became my biggest cheerleader, the one person in my corner. He made me feel like I deserved to be happy. When Preston proposed, exactly 1 year after we started dating, I was completely and utterly stunned. We were at a beautiful rooftop restaurant overlooking the entire city skyline. It was a perfect evening. When he got down on one knee and pulled out a simple, elegant solitaire ring, I didn't even hesitate. I just burst into tears and said yes. I said yes because, for the first time in my entire life, I finally, truly felt like I was someone's first choice. I couldn't wait to tell my parents. I thought, maybe this will be it. Maybe this will be the thing that finally makes them see me, makes them proud. I called them the next day from the little townhouse Preston had just bought, my voice bubbling with an excitement I couldn't contain. "Mom? Dad? I have some amazing news. Preston asked me to marry him." There was a distinct pause on the other end of the line. It was just long enough to feel uncomfortable. Then, my mom's voice, as predictable as ever. "Oh. Wow. Well, Preston must be doing very well for himself. His salary must be impressive. I hope he's taking good care of you." My dad's response was similar. "Well, that's good news, Beatrice. At least you won't have to worry about money anymore." They didn't ask how he proposed. They didn't ask to see the ring. They didn't ask how I felt. It was all about Preston and what he could provide. The familiar, hollow ache returned, a dull throb in my chest, but I pushed it down as hard as I could. I was happy, and I refused to let them ruin it. We hosted a small engagement dinner at our new home. I invited my parents and Lorelei. His parents, who were warm and kind and welcomed me with open arms from day one, were there too. The evening was lovely on the surface, but I couldn't shake a feeling of dread. Lorelei was on. She was overly friendly with Preston, laughing a little too loudly at his jokes, touching his arm a little too often as she spoke. She'd managed to steer every conversation back to herself and her own career struggles. At one point, my mom leaned over to me while Preston was talking to my dad about the stock market and whispered, "You know, Beatrice, Preston must have some successful friends. Lorelei could really use someone like him. She's been so unlucky in love." I felt a hot flash of anger crawl up my neck. I just stared at her, my wineglass frozen halfway to my lips. "Mom, this is my engagement dinner. Can we not do this tonight?" She just patted my hand, a placating gesture she'd used my whole life. "I'm just thinking of your sister, dear. It's important to help family." I tried to brush it off as a one-time comment, but it wasn't. It became a theme. Every single time I talked to my mom after that, she'd find a way to bring it up. "Have you talked to Preston about introducing Lorelei to anyone at his company? Or Lorelei is really struggling to meet a good man. Maybe Preston could help." It was like she couldn't stand the idea of me having something, anything, that Lorelei didn't. The red flags were there, waving right in my face, but I was so blinded by love and the desperate hope of a new life that I chose to ignore them. I told myself I was being too sensitive, that it was just my mom being my mom. It was a mistake that would cost me everything. The wedding planning process was a nightmare, and the main architects of that nightmare were my mother and Lorelei. They acted more excited about what Preston's side of the family was contributing than about the actual wedding. My mother would say things like, "Well, it's so nice of them to pay for the venue. That takes a lot of pressure off." As if it wasn't my wedding, too. I remember going wedding dress shopping. I found a simple, elegant A-line dress that I absolutely loved. It felt like me. But my mom and Lorelei immediately vetoed it. Oh, honey, it's a bit plain, isn't it? Lorelai said, holding up a gaudy mermaid-style dress covered in sequins. You should wear something with more impact. They wore me down until I chose a dress that felt more like a costume than a wedding gown. The wedding day itself was beautiful, objectively. It was at a lovely old estate with sprawling gardens in late spring. I should have been blissfully happy. But of course, Lorelai couldn't just let me have my moment. She showed up in this over-the-top, tight-fitting, sequined gold dress that looked more like something you'd wear to a New Year's Eve party in Vegas than to your sister's wedding. It was a statement. It was a competition. And everyone noticed. She spent half the night not by my side, or with our family, but networking with Preston's friends and colleagues. I watched from the head table as she moved through the crowd, laughing, flirting, handing her business card to one of Preston's investment partners. It was like she was trying to audition for a role in his life. And the comments, oh my God, the comments. She'd make these jokes, loudly enough for me to hear, about how lucky I was to have landed someone like Preston. She said to one of his aunts, "Wow, Beatrice really hit the jackpot, didn't she?" And later, to a friend of ours, "Preston must have a soft spot for charity cases." I could feel the backhanded compliments dripping with a thick, syrupy jealousy. I wasn't the shadow anymore, and Lorelai couldn't handle it. I saw it in the way she acted around Preston all night, overly familiar, always laughing at his jokes like they were the funniest thing in the world. At one point during the reception, I was talking to a cousin and I looked over towards the bar. I saw her cornering him, her body angled towards his, her hand resting on his arm. It made my stomach physically turn. I excused myself and walked over, my heart pounding a nervous rhythm against my ribs. As I approached, the conversation stopped abruptly. "What were you guys talking about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light and breezy, like a happy new bride. Lorelai just shrugged and gave me a sickly sweet smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, nothing. I was just thanking him again for being so good to you. The honeymoon phase of my marriage, a trip to Italy, was everything I wanted it to be. It was perfect. But my family's behavior lingered in the back of my mind. The whole time, my mom kept texting, pushing me to involve Lorelai more in Preston's social circle. It was like it was my wifely duty to find my sister a wealthy husband, too. At first, I thought I was just imagining things. Maybe I was being too sensitive, too insecure after a lifetime of being second best. But then I started noticing how Lorelai treated me differently after the wedding. She stopped pretending to be supportive and started making subtle, cutting digs about my new life. If Preston posted something sweet about me online, she'd leave a sarcastic comment like, "Guess we know who the favorite is now." Instead of celebrating with me, my family acted like I owed them something for my happiness. I should have trusted my instincts. I should have seen the warning signs for what they were. But at the time, I was just trying so desperately to enjoy this new chapter of my life, even if it meant ignoring the cracks that were forming right under the surface. About a month into our marriage, Lorelai started showing up at our house unannounced. And when I say showing up, I don't mean popping by for a quick hello. I mean waltzing into my home, using the spare key my mother had insisted she have for emergencies, like she owned the place. She'd arrive mid-afternoon, always impeccably dressed for no apparent reason, heels, a designer bag, a full face of makeup. She'd just let herself in, calling out in a sing-song voice, "You who? Anybody home?" At first, I tried to be nice. I told myself, maybe she just wants to spend more time with me. But no, she wasn't coming to see me. If I was home, she'd make polite, boring small talk with me for 5 minutes before finding a reason to seek out Preston. He worked from home a lot, and she'd linger in his office, or in the kitchen while he was making lunch. He loved to cook, it was his way of de-stressing, and she would sit at the kitchen island, watching him, laughing at his jokes like she was auditioning for a sitcom. It made me incredibly uncomfortable. I remember one day I was folding laundry in the living room when I overheard them. Preston was explaining, in great detail, how he made his famous bolognese sauce, and Lorelai was laughing so loudly you'd think he was a stand-up comedian. It wasn't just a polite chuckle. It was that kind of breathy, trying too hard laugh, the kind that makes your stomach twist because you know it's not about the joke. It's about the performance. I tried talking to Preston about it. I even tried to make it sound casual, not accusatory. "Hey," I said one evening as we were getting ready for bed, "I love that Lorelai's visiting, but maybe it's getting to be a bit much? It feels like she's here every day." He just shrugged, not even looking up from his laptop. "She's your sister, B. She's probably just lonely. Don't be so hard on her." Lonely? Lorelai wasn't lonely. She was bored. And predatory. There's a difference. Things escalated when she started coming over even more frequently. Once, I came home from a long day at my internship to find her sitting on our couch with Preston, eating takeout from our favorite Thai place, watching a movie. Like they were having a little date night. When I asked what she was doing there, she just smiled brightly and said, "Oh, I was in the neighborhood and figured I'd keep Preston company since you were working so late." You poor thing. That's when I started to notice other things, tiny things that felt huge. Lorelai had this knack for finding reasons to touch Preston. Fixing his tie when it was already perfectly straight. Brushing a piece of imaginary lint off his shoulder. Her hand would linger on his arm a second too long when she was making a point. Preston didn't seem to notice, or at least he pretended not to. He'd just laugh it off, making me feel like I was the crazy one for seeing something in it. I tried to set boundaries. I said to her one afternoon, "Lorelai, I'd really appreciate it if you'd call before coming over." She immediately looked wounded, her eyes welling up with fake tears. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she said. "I just feel so comfortable here. I thought we were family." She twisted it so that I was the one being cold and unwelcoming. One night, after she'd finally left after a 3-hour visit, I confronted Preston again, more forcefully this time. "What is going on with you and Lorelai?" He finally looked at me, his expression annoyed. "What do you mean?" "She's your sister." "Exactly," I said, my voice rising with frustration. "So why does it feel like she's here for you and not for me? Why does it feel like I'm interrupting something whenever I walk into a room with you two?" He denied everything. He said I was overthinking it, that I was insecure and paranoid. He said Lorelai was just friendly and that I needed to relax. He used classic gaslighting phrases. "You're being hysterical. Why are you so jealous of your own sister? I thought you'd be happy that your sister and I get along so well." He made me feel like I was the one with the problem. But I couldn't shake the feeling, that cold, slithering feeling in my gut, that something was terribly, terribly wrong. The final few weeks of my marriage were a slow-motion car crash. Preston started coming home late from the office almost every night. He always had an excuse, but they started to feel thin, rehearsed. Late-night meetings that I knew weren't on his calendar. Work dinners with clients whose names he couldn't seem to remember. Errands he had to run after work that took hours. The easy intimacy we had shared was completely gone, replaced by a tense, polite distance. He was a polite roommate who happened to share my bed. He was constantly on his phone, smiling at texts that he would quickly hide if I walked into the room. He'd take calls and walk into another room, closing the door behind him. The house, which once felt like a loving home, was now filled with secrets and a silence that was heavier than any argument. One night, he walked in the door at nearly midnight. I had been waiting up for him, sitting on the couch in the dark, my stomach twisted into a tight, painful knot. I had tried calling and texting, but he hadn't answered. I had imagined every horrible scenario, a car accident, a mugging. He walked in, looking tired, and he wouldn't meet my eyes. He mumbled something about a project that went late and walked past me towards the kitchen. As he did, a scent wafted towards me. It wasn't his usual clean, woodsy cologne. It wasn't the sterile smell of his office building or the exhaust fumes of the city. It was perfume. And not just any perfume. It was something floral and intensely sweet, a distinct and overwhelming blend of jasmine and vanilla. I am a perfumer. It's not just what I do, it's a part of who I am. My sense of smell is my most powerful tool. I know every note, every combination. I know every single scent in my own extensive collection, and I knew every cloying, expensive scent that Lorelei wore. And that wasn't one of mine. It was hers. It was the signature scent she'd been wearing for years. I felt the air get sucked out of my lungs. The room started to spin. All the little moments, all the red flags, all the dismissed suspicions, they all clicked into place in one horrifying, devastating instant. I didn't even have to ask. The truth was hanging there in the air between us, as thick and suffocating as the scent of her perfume on his collar. He saw the look on my face. He knew he was caught. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, staring at him, while he finally had the decency to look ashamed. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I'd seen 1,000 times. Finally, before I could even force the words out of my own throat, he admitted it. "Beatrice," he said, his voice barely a whisper, a coward's whisper. "Lorelei and we're in love." In love. Those 2 words hit me like a physical blow. A freight train. My sister. My husband. My mind couldn't even process it. It was a betrayal so profound, so complete, that it felt surreal. All I could think was, how, when, why? In our house? In my bed? I just stood there, frozen, while he mumbled pathetic excuses about how these things just happen, how he didn't mean for it to happen, how he was so sorry. I felt like I was watching my life unravel in real time, the seams ripping apart right in front of my eyes. He was sorry. That was supposed to make it better. But all I could smell was her perfume, the scent of my own personal hell, a scent I knew I would never be able to forget. In that moment, he and my sister hadn't just broken my heart, they had broken my reality. The next day was a blur of shock and a pain so deep it felt physical. After a sleepless night spent in the sterile guest room, listening to the silence of a house that was no longer a home, I watched Preston pack a bag. He couldn't even look at me. The silence was deafening. He just mumbled something about staying at a hotel to give me space, but I knew where he was going. He left, and the sound of the front door clicking shut felt like a final judgment. I didn't know where to go. I just knew I couldn't stay in that house, a house that was now haunted by their ghosts and the lingering scent of betrayal. In a moment of sheer, primal desperation, I did the only thing I could think of. I called my parents. I needed them. For the first time in my adult life, I truly, desperately needed my mother and father. My mom answered the phone, her voice cheerful and maddeningly normal. "Beatrice." What a surprise. "How are things?" My own voice came out as a choked, ragged sob. I explained everything, the words tumbling out in a messy, incoherent rush. I told her about Preston, about Lorelei, about the perfume, about the confession. I told her I needed to come home, just for a little while, just until I could get my feet under me and figure out what to do. There was a long, loaded silence on the other end of the line. It was a silence that spoke volumes. Then, she hesitated, and her voice became strained and artificial. "Oh, honey," she said. "Oh, that's terrible. But I'd love to help, but the house is under renovation right now. It's such a complete mess. There's dust everywhere. The kitchen is all torn up. It's just not a good time." Renovation? They had lived in that house for over 20 years and had never so much as repainted a wall. The lie was so blatant, so cold and cruel, it knocked the wind out of me more than the affair itself. Renovation? I repeated, my voice hollow. Yes, the kitchen. It's a complete gut job. You wouldn't be comfortable here at all. My hand was trembling so hard I could barely hold the phone. I hung up without saying another word. A few minutes later, clinging to a last shred of hope that this was all some horrible misunderstanding, I called my dad on his cell phone. Maybe he would be different. I told him the story again, my voice flat and devoid of emotion now. He listened, sighed heavily, and then he gave me the same rehearsed line. "It's just not a good time, sweetheart. Your mother's right, the house is a disaster. You know how it is." I hung up the phone and just sat there, in the perfectly clean guest bedroom of my own house, staring at the wall. My parents had never really been there for me, not in the ways that counted. But this was a new low. A new kind of cruelty I didn't even know was possible. I wasn't just dealing with a betrayal from my husband and my sister. I was being actively, deliberately abandoned by my entire family. And in that moment, the horrifying truth crashed down on me. They weren't just making excuses. They knew. They had to have known about Lorelai and Preston's affair the whole time. Their awkward excuses, their refusal to help, they hadn't been protecting me. They had been protecting her. Lorelai, their golden child, could do no wrong in their eyes. Even when she stabbed her own sister in the back, they still prioritized her comfort and her secrets over my pain. That night, I called an old friend from college, sobbing hysterically, and she let me sleep on her couch. As I lay there in the dark, in a stranger's apartment, I understood. I had no family. I was completely, utterly alone, adrift in a sea of my own wreckage. The weeks that followed were a living nightmare. I found a tiny, depressing one-bedroom apartment in a run-down building on the other side of town. It was all I could afford. The divorce process went quickly and brutally. Preston had made me sign a prenup before the wedding, something his lawyer had insisted on. At the time, I was too in love to care, thinking it was just a formality. I met with a legal aid lawyer who told me bluntly that the prenup was ironclad. There was no point in fighting it. So I walked away from our 2-year marriage with basically nothing but my clothes and a mountain of student loan debt. He kept the house, the cars, the furniture, everything. After everything fell apart, I reached out to his parents. I didn't do it to be vindictive. I just wanted them to hear the truth from me. His mom was surprisingly kind, even admitting she'd had her doubts about Lorelai's intentions from the very start. But apparently, Preston didn't see it that way. He found out I had contacted his family and called me, screaming, accusing me of trying to turn them against him. He claimed I was stirring up drama. The irony was suffocating. As if that wasn't bad enough, he took things a step further. It wasn't enough that he had destroyed my trust, my marriage, and my family. He decided to ruin my career, too. I found out when I showed up for my part-time job at the boutique one morning, only to be immediately called into my manager's office. My boss, a woman who had always been so supportive of my passion, suddenly couldn't make eye contact. She handed me a final paycheck and muttered some corporate nonsense about restructuring and how things just weren't working out. It didn't make sense until a coworker, a sweet girl named Sarah, pulled me aside later as I was leaving. She told me that Preston had spoken to the owner, a man he played golf with, and claimed I was unstable and causing drama that was bad for business. I was furious. But more than that, I was broken. I went back to my empty apartment and just sat on the floor. For days, I barely moved. I'd try to cook, but I'd forget about the pan on the stove and burn it. I'd sit on my lumpy, second-hand couch and stare at the TV, not even registering what was on. Friends would call, but I'd let it go to voicemail. I didn't have the energy to explain the sheer magnitude of the disaster my life had become. Rent was due soon, and without a job, I had no idea how I was going to pay it. I felt like the universe had systematically ripped away every single thing I had ever worked for. Then one night, something clicked. I was scrolling aimlessly through Instagram, looking at pictures of people I didn't even know living lives I couldn't afford, when I stumbled on a post about small businesses. It was a woman who had started her own candle-making company out of her kitchen. She talked about her own messy divorce, about how she'd turned her passion into a career and built something from the ground up. I sat there on my floor, holding my phone in the dark, and a tiny thought sparked in the darkness of my mind: why not me? I had always dreamed of starting my own perfume line, but I'd kept pushing it aside, thinking I wasn't ready, that I needed more experience, more money. Well, if there was ever a time to take a risk, it was now. I had absolutely nothing left to lose. The very next day, I took out a small, high-interest personal loan, just enough to cover the basics. I used what little savings I had left. My tiny apartment became my workspace. The dining table was covered in beakers and glass vials. The whole place smelled like a chaotic mix of essential oils. I worked tirelessly, experimenting with blends, failing over and over again until I got them right. I poured all my pain, all my anger, all my grief into those little bottles. Word started to spread slowly through word of mouth and a little online shop I set up. Then one day, a small beauty blogger with a decent following posted a review, raving about how unique and complex my scents were. Overnight, my Instagram blew up. The second year was the turning point. I started getting inquiries from small boutiques that wanted to carry my perfume. I rented a small, sunlit studio in town, a far cry from my cramped dining table. It wasn't much, just a single room with enough space for my supplies, but it was mine. I even hired a part-time assistant to help with the growing workload. This business wasn't just a way to pay the bills. It was my way of taking back control of my life. Every bottle of perfume I created felt like a small victory, a quiet reminder that I was capable of building something beautiful and lasting from the ashes of everything I had ever lost. 2 years passed. 2 years of pouring every ounce of my energy, my pain, and my passion into my work. My little brand, which I called Beatrice Botanicals, was thriving beyond my wildest dreams. The studio was my sanctuary, a place filled with light, the beautiful scents I created, and the quiet hum of productivity. I had Mia, my wonderful assistant, who had become one of my closest friends. Life was stable. It was peaceful. I was finally, cautiously, happy. Then, out of nowhere, on one of those rainy, miserable Tuesday afternoons where you just want to curl up with a cup of coffee and not deal with anyone, it happened. I was in my studio, carefully packing up a large wholesale order for a small boutique in Seattle, humming along to the radio. The bell on the front door jingled. At first, I thought it was Mia coming back from her Starbucks run. Or maybe a customer wandering in to browse. I called out from the back room, my voice cheerful, "Be right with you." I walked up from behind the curtain, wiping my hands on my apron, a welcoming smile on my face. The smile froze and died on my lips. It was her. Lorelei. And she was holding a baby in her arms. I just froze, my hands still in the air. She looked awful. And I don't mean just tired mom awful. I mean, we're talking a messy, greasy bun, dark circles under her eyes that looked like deep purple bruises, a soaked-through coat that was missing a button, and a baby bundled up in a stained, faded onesie that had clearly seen better days. For a second, I honestly thought I was hallucinating, that the stress and long hours had finally made my brain snap. Because why in the world would she be here? In my studio? My safe space? In my life? But no. It was real. The smell of wet wool and something sour, like spoiled milk, filled the air. "Beatrice," she said, her voice all shaky and thin, a ghost of the confident woman she used to be. I didn't know where else to go. I just stood there, staring at her. It had been 2 whole years. 2 years since I'd last seen her face, except for in the glossy, happy pictures she used to post online, pictures where she and Preston were parading around like the king and queen of everything. Now, she looked like life had not just kicked her down a few notches, it had beaten her into the ground. "What do you want, Lorelei?" I asked, my voice flat and cold as stone. I was surprised at how calm I sounded. Inside, my heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. She shifted the fussing baby in her arms, trying to soothe him, and gave me this pitiful, pleading look. It was the same look she used on our parents when she wanted something as a child. "I need help," she said finally, her voice cracking. "Preston left me. I don't have anyone else to turn to." I swear I almost laughed out loud. Preston left her. Wow, what a shocking plot twist. Who could have ever predicted that a man who cheats with you would eventually cheat on you? Oh, right. Literally everyone in the world except her. "Preston left you?" I said, letting a single, cynical eyebrow arch up my forehead. "Gee, I wonder why." She winced as if I'd slapped her, but she didn't argue. She didn't have the energy. "Beatrice, please," she begged, taking a tentative step forward. "I know I've made horrible mistakes. I know I hurt you in a way I can never fix. But I'm desperate. I have nowhere else to go." And then she played what she thought was her trump card, the one thing she believed could melt my frozen heart. "This is your nephew," she added, motioning with her head towards the whimpering baby. "Don't you want to meet him?" "My nephew." "Right." I glanced at the baby. He looked innocent enough, small and helpless and miserable. He didn't ask for any of this. But then I looked back at Lorelei, at the face of the sister who had systematically and gleefully blown up my life without a single thought for my well-being, and any flicker of sympathy I might have felt was instantly extinguished. "Why don't you call Preston?" I asked, my voice still eerily calm and even. "Isn't this his kid? Shouldn't he be helping you with custody arrangements and child support?" Her face turned a blotchy, bright red, and she started stammering. "Well, no. He's not the father." Of course, he wasn't. The whole pathetic, messy story came spilling out after that, a rambling confession right there on my polished studio floor. Apparently, after Lorelei won Preston, she realized he wasn't exactly the dream husband she'd imagined. Sure, he had money, but he was also controlling and arrogant. Shocking. So, naturally, she started cheating on him with someone else. She kept draining his bank account to fund her luxurious lifestyle, handbags, trips, expensive dinners, but when Preston found out she was cheating, he cut her off completely. He hired a private investigator, got all the proof he needed, and filed for a very swift divorce. Since then, she'd been trying to keep up appearances, buying designer clothes on credit cards she couldn't pay and posting old vacation photos on Instagram to make it look like her life was still perfect. But you can only fake it for so long. And when she came to me that day, she was absolutely, completely falling apart. "Beatrice, please," she begged, tears now streaming down her face, mixing with the rain on her cheeks. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm begging you. I have no money, no home, nothing. The other guy is gone. I can't do this on my own." I just stared at her. Part of me wanted to scream until my throat was raw. "Are you kidding me?" The same sister who took my husband, ruined my marriage, and stood by silently while her parents abandoned me is now standing in my place of business, a business I built from the literal ashes of the life she helped burn down, begging for my help? "You have some nerve," I said finally, the words sharp and clear like shards of glass. "You didn't care about me or my life when you were blowing it up, but now that your life is a mess, you want me to come and bail you out? Did you help me when your new boyfriend got me fired? Did Mom and Dad help me when I had nowhere to go?" She started sobbing harder, big, heaving, theatrical sobs, and honestly, I wasn't moved. This wasn't new. Lorelei had always been good at turning on the waterworks to get what she wanted. "I don't have anywhere else to go," she wailed again, her voice thick with self-pity. "That is not my problem," I replied. I walked to the front door, my steps feeling firm and steady on the floor. I opened it, and the sound of the cold rain outside filled the quiet studio. I motioned for her to leave. "You made your choices, Lorelei. Over and over again, you made your choices. Now, you get to live with them. Or go to your lovely parents. Just stay the hell out of my life. All of you." She hesitated, standing there in the doorway, a pathetic, rain-soaked figure. She looked at me like she thought I'd suddenly changed my mind, that the old, weak Beatrice who would do anything for a scrap of her approval would re-emerge. But when she saw the look on my face, cold, hard, and absolutely final, she clutched the baby tighter to her chest and walked out into the rain without another word. As the door shut behind her with a definitive click, I stood there for a minute, just breathing. I didn't feel bad. Not really. Maybe a pang of sympathy for the baby, sure, but not for her. I felt free. The last chain to my painful past had just been broken. I had finally chosen myself. If you're still listening, please help me by liking the video and commenting the number 1 below. That way, I'll know you gave me a like, and I'll know you're with me on this journey. Your support means the world to me and encourages me to keep going. Please, comment with a 1, and then listen as I tell you the rest of my story. I've always believed in karma. Not in a mystical, magical way, but in the sense that your actions have consequences. That eventually, the way you treat people comes back to you. And let me tell you, karma didn't hold back. Not with Lorelai, not with my parents, and especially not with Preston. After he left Lorelai, she didn't go quietly into the night. She dragged him all over social media, posting long, dramatic, and mostly fabricated rants about how he'd emotionally abused her and controlled her every move. Now, never mind that she was the one cheating on him while living off his money. But the thing is, even lies can have a kernel of truth that people latch onto. People in his industry, where reputation is everything, started to look at him differently. His carefully crafted image of a brilliant, respectable businessman started to crumble. Potential investors, already wary of his arrogant attitude, backed out of deals. His business partners stopped answering his calls. He wasn't the saint he pretended to be, and people finally started seeing the selfish, ruthless man that lay beneath the polished veneer. The last I heard, he had to sell his company for a fraction of what it was worth, just to cut his losses and pay off his mounting debts. One day, about a year after Lorelai's disastrous visit to my studio, Preston showed up out of nowhere. I was in my studio, testing a new blend of rose and sandalwood, when the bell jingled. And there he was. He looked completely different, less polished, more tired and worn around the edges. The designer suit was gone, replaced by jeans and a wrinkled shirt. He had this sad, almost desperate energy about him. He started with some awkward small talk, complimenting the studio. "Wow, you've really done well for yourself, B. The place looks great." I didn't say anything. I just stood behind my counter, arms crossed, and waited. Then it came. The pathetic, predictable plea. "I made a mistake, Beatrice," he said, his voice low. "A terrible, life-ruining mistake. I didn't realize what I had until I lost it." He went on and on about how Lorelai had ruined his life, how he missed our quiet evenings, how he missed the way things used to be with me. He was hoping, praying, that we could start over. I let him finish his entire, rambling speech. When he was done, a hopeful, pathetic look on his face, I didn't even raise my voice. I just looked at him, right in the eye, and said, "Preston, I built myself a whole new life from the wreckage of the one you helped destroy. I built it with my own 2 hands, without any help from you or anyone else. And there is absolutely no space for you in it." The look on his face was something to see. Pure shock. Disbelief. As if he genuinely thought that, after everything, I'd be waiting in the wings to welcome him back with open arms and fix his broken life. "Now, please leave," I said, pointing to the door. "You're bad for business." The audacity of that man. To come into my space, my sanctuary, and ask for a second chance. He left without another word. And I have never seen or heard from him since. Eventually, Lorelai had to move into a small, cramped, 2-bedroom apartment in a not-so-great part of town. The life of luxury was definitively over. She now works at a call center, the kind of job with harsh fluorescent lights and endless rows of cubicles that she used to mock other people for having. She spends most of her time ranting on social media about how unfair life is, blaming everyone but herself for how things turned out. She still tries to maintain a shred of her old superiority, posting passive-aggressive quotes like, "Some people are just born lucky, but I guess not everyone deserves it." It's both pathetic and a little sad. And my parents, oh, they didn't come out unscathed either. When Lorelei's life started completely falling apart, when the debts piled up and she was facing eviction, they did what they always do, they bailed her out. They sold their house, the place they'd lived in for over 30 years, the place with all our childhood memories, or lack thereof, in my case. They used the money to cover her massive credit card debts and legal fees from her own series of messy relationships. They lost any chance they had of a comfortable, peaceful retirement. The inheritance I never expected to get was gone, spent on saving the child who had already cost them so much. They moved into a cramped condo on the outskirts of town, a far cry from the spacious home they once took so much pride in. I heard through a distant cousin that they're struggling financially now. My dad, who should be enjoying his retirement playing golf, had to pick up part-time work as a delivery driver. And my mom, who always prided herself on her leisure time, started sewing alterations out of their tiny living room to make ends meet. They haven't called me once to genuinely apologize or even acknowledge what happened, what they did. Instead, they send these weird, guilt-trippy emails every few months. Stuff like, "Family is all we have, Beatrice. You should reach out sometime." Or, the last one I got, "Your mother and I aren't getting any younger, you know." But you know what? I read those emails, and I just delete them. I don't feel bad. Not for any of them. I used to ache for their approval, for just a crumb of their affection. Now, I feel nothing but a quiet, profound indifference. They made their choice, over and over again, for my entire life. And their choice was always Lorelei. They can live with that choice. And I can live without them. As for me, things couldn't be better. My business is thriving in ways I never could have imagined when I was mixing oils on my apartment floor. I opened my first real storefront, a cozy little shop in a beautiful neighborhood in Chicago, and it's been a hit. We have customers coming in from all over, drawn by our personalized approach to creating scents. I've even been featured in a few magazines and some popular blogs. It feels surreal some days. But more than the financial success, I feel proud. I built this. Me. With my own two hands. On a personal note, I've also moved on in the best way possible. I'm now engaged to a wonderful man named Grant. We met when he came into my shop, looking for a birthday gift for his mother. He's a high school history teacher. He's kind, he's funny, he's steady as a rock, and when he looks at me, I know he sees me. All of me. The strong parts, the scarred parts, everything. There are no games, no hidden agendas. Just a quiet, comfortable love that feels like coming home for the first time. We had our first date at a small neighborhood diner, not a fancy rooftop restaurant. We talked for hours. He told me about his passion for history, about his students. He asked me about my family, and for the first time, I told someone the whole, unvarnished truth. He just listened, his eyes full of empathy, and when I was done, he just reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm so sorry you went through that," he said. And that was it. No judgment, just kindness. We're planning our wedding for next spring, a small, intimate ceremony in a botanical garden with our closest friends. And by family, I mean our chosen family. My family of friends who supported me when I had nothing. The ones who let me cry on their couches, who brought me groceries when I was broke, who celebrated my smallest victories. They are my true family. We've already joked about how the reception will smell amazing, because I'm custom blending a scent just for the day. A scent of new beginnings, of hope and resilience. It's my way of reclaiming something that was once so tainted by betrayal and turning it into a symbol of my own happiness. A happiness that no one can ever take away from me again. Anyway, that's my story. It's been a long and painful road to get here, and there are still days when the old scars ache a little. For years, I let my family's definition of my worth dictate how I felt about myself. I thought if I just worked harder, achieved more, maybe one day they'd finally see me. But I've learned that you can't force people to value you. You can only value yourself. Life is so much better, so much more peaceful, when you have the courage to cut out the toxicity and focus on building a life that makes you happy, a life that is authentically yours. I'm in such a good place now, and honestly, I wouldn't change a single thing that happened. It all led me here. It made me stronger, more resilient, and it taught me what truly matters in this life. So if my story resonated with you, if you've ever felt like the second choice or the invisible one, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Your own stories of resilience give me strength. Thank you so much for listening, for letting me share this with you. You've been my little therapy session.